Welcome to our deep dive into the world of anxiety disorders.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, you've given us a really fascinating mix of forces to dig into today,
Awesome.
including the National Institute of Mental Health's booklet on anxiety disorders and a research paper titled Introduction to Different Types of Anxiety Disorders.
Sounds like a good combo.
Yeah, so our mission today is to take all this information and give you a clear, concise understanding of this common mental health challenge.
Love it.
And, it's more common than you might think.
Really?
The NIMH says a whopping 40 million adults in the U.S. alone are affected by anxiety disorders.
Wow, 40 million. That's a huge number.
It is. It really highlights how prevalent anxiety disorders are.
It does, for sure.
And before we dive into the specifics, I think it's important to clarify that anxiety disorders aren't just everyday worries or stress.
Right.
We're talking about something much more persistent.
Okay.
These disorders last for 6 months or more, and they can actually worsen without treatment.
That makes sense.
And here's another layer of complexity that I found really interesting.
Okay, what's that?
Anxiety disorders often coexist with other conditions like depression or substance abuse.
Oh, wow. I see how that could make things even more challenging.
Yeah, it can make diagnosis really tricky because the symptoms can overlap.
Definitely.
Okay, so to get us started, let's lay out the different types of anxiety disorders we'll be exploring today.
Okay, sounds good.
We'll be diving into panic disorder, OCD, PTSD, social phobia,
Lots to cover.
specific phobias, and generalized anxiety disorder.
Great.
Let's start with panic disorder, which can be incredibly debilitating.
Panic disorder.
The NIMH booklet does a great job of capturing the sheer terror of a panic attack through these vivid first-person accounts.
I can imagine.
Yeah, they are really powerful.
Definitely those firsthand experiences can be so eye-opening.
Yes, the way people describe their panic attacks is really intense.
Yeah, like how...
They use phrases like a violent experience,
Oh, wow.
like they're dying,
That's heavy.
or like things are crashing in on me.
You could almost feel the intensity of their fear just reading those words.
It's palpable.
Totally. And it makes sense why someone having a panic attack might think they're having a heart attack.
Absolutely. The physical symptoms can be terrifying.
Like what kinds of symptoms?
Well, the booklet mentions a racing, heart-sweating dizziness, even chest pain.
Oh, wow. Yeah, those are some serious symptoms.
And what makes panic attacks even more terrifying is that they can come out of nowhere.
Really?
Yeah, the booklet even mentions that they can happen during sleep.
Oh my gosh, imagine waking up in the grip of a panic attack. That must be terrifying.
It's no wonder that people who experience these attacks often develop a fear of being in situations where escape might be difficult.
Right, because they never know when it might hit.
Exactly. It's that unpredictability that really fuels the anxiety.
Definitely. And so that fear of being trapped leads to,
Agoraphobia.
right, agoraphobia.
The booklet explains how this fear of open spaces or crowds can develop as people try to avoid places where they've previously had panic attacks.
That makes sense. I could see how that would happen.
So their world starts shrinking as they try to control their fear.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly isolating.
It is. Let's shift gears now to a disorder that on the surface seems completely different.
Okay, what's that?
Obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD.
Okay, OCD, yeah.
The booklet uses this very relatable example of someone who feels compelled to wash their hair 3 times.
3 times.
Because 3 was a good luck number.
Interesting choice.
Right. It highlights those 2 key components of OCD.
You mean obsessions and compulsions?
Exactly.
So the obsession might be a fear of bad luck, and the compulsion is washing their hair 3 times to ward it off.
Exactly. And you know how some people have those little rituals or routines?
Oh, yeah.
Like needing to touch a doorknob 3 times before leaving the house?
Yeah, I can see that.
Well, imagine if those rituals became so intense that they took over your life.
That's what it's like for someone with OCD.
Exactly. And it's not just a preference for order or cleanliness.
Right, it goes beyond that.
For someone with OCD, these rituals become so time-consuming and distressing that they interfere with their daily life.
They really take over.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to a disorder that stems from a very different source.
Okay, what's next?
Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD.
The PTSD guy.
The booklet shares a powerful account from a woman who developed PTSD after being raped.
That's so sad.
It's heartbreaking, and it really underscores the fact that this disorder often develops after someone experiences or witnesses a terrifying event.
That trauma like that.
Absolutely. It could be anything from a mugging to a car accident.
Or a natural disaster.
Exactly. The key is that the event is perceived as deeply traumatic.
And it leads to these long-lasting effects.
Right. The booklet highlights a particularly distressing symptom of PTSD.
What's that?
Flashbacks.
Oh yeah, flashbacks.
These are those sudden, intrusive relivings of the traumatic event.
I've heard they can be so vivid.
They can, and they can be triggered by seemingly random things.
Like what kinds of things?
A sound, a smell, a certain place.
Wow. And for the person experiencing the flashback, it can feel like they're reliving the trauma all over again.
Exactly. The woman in the booklet describes it as feeling like a splash of water suddenly pulling her back into the trauma.
It makes you realize just how powerful those memories can be.
It does. Now, another disorder that can be incredibly isolating is social phobia.
Also known as social anxiety disorder.
Right. The booklet talks about how people with this disorder experience an intense fear of being judged or embarrassed in social situations.
I think a lot of people can relate to that to some extent.
To some extent, yeah. But for people with social phobia, it's so debilitating that it disrupts their work, school, and relationships.
So it's not just about being shy.
No, it's much more than that. There's a personal account in the booklet from someone who dreaded even simple social interactions.
Like what?
Things like attending a college class or a party.
Wow, even those everyday things.
Exactly. They described feeling physically ill at the thought of these situations, their heart pounding, palms sweating, and this overwhelming feeling of self-consciousness.
And it's not just a feeling, right?
Yeah.
The physical symptoms are very real.
They talk about blushing, sweating, trembling, even difficulty speaking.
Yeah, and then those physical symptoms just feed into the anxiety, making them even more self-conscious.
It becomes this vicious cycle.
So it's really a multifaceted disorder.
It is. Okay, let's talk about specific phobias.
Okay, specific phobias.
I think we can all relate to being afraid of certain things.
Yeah.
But phobias take that fear to another level.
Right, it becomes more intense and irrational.
Exactly. The booklet uses the example of someone who is terrified of flying.
That's a pretty common one.
It is, and it illustrates how specific phobias involve this intense, irrational fear of something that poses little to no real danger.
Like flying statistically, it's one of the safest ways to travel.
Right, but the fear doesn't have to be logical to have a profound impact on someone's life.
Exactly. It's about how that fear makes them feel.
And what I find fascinating is how specific these phobias can be. The person in the booklet mentions that they're perfectly fine with trains traveling at high speed,
Okay.
but terrified of flying.
Interesting.
It seems illogical,
A
right?
little bit, yeah.
But that's what makes phobias so unique. The fear is often completely out of proportion to the actual threat.
So it's really about perception.
It is. Okay, our last stop on this tour of anxiety disorders is generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD.
Okay, GAD. What sets this one apart?
Well, with GAD, it's not about a specific object or situation.
Okay.
It's more about this pervasive sense of worry that seems to color everything.
Like a constant state of worry.
Exactly. It's not just feeling stressed or worried occasionally.
Right, it's more intense than that.
It is. It's this excessive, persistent worry about a variety of things, often everyday matters, that most people wouldn't find so distressing.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, the booklet includes stories from people who talk about constantly worrying about things like what to cook for dinner.
Really, even something as simple as that?
Yeah, or what gift to buy for someone.
Wow, sounds exhausting.
It is, and it often manifests physically, too.
You mean like physical symptoms?
Yeah, things like a racing heart trouble, sleeping, muscle tension, headaches, and fatigue.
It's like their bodies are stuck in a constant state of fight or flight.
Exactly, and the booklet mentions that people with GAD often realize that their worry is excessive.
But they can't seem to control it.
Right, that must be incredibly frustrating.
I can imagine feeling trapped in this cycle of worry, knowing it's irrational, but unable to break free.
It sounds like GAD takes a huge toll on a person's life.
Definitely. But here's the good news.
What's that?
There are effective treatments available for anxiety disorders.
That's good to hear.
Absolutely. The booklet mentions medication psychotherapy, and often a combination of both as being the two main approaches.
So let's start with psychotherapy.
Okay.
What kinds of therapies are effective for treating anxiety disorders?
The one type of therapy that's been shown to be particularly effective is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Oh yeah, CBT. I've heard that mentioned a lot, but I'm not exactly sure how it works. Can you walk me through it?
Of course. So let's say someone has social phobia, the intense fear of social situations.
Okay.
A CBT therapist might help them first identify their negative thought patterns.
You mean like those automatic thoughts?
Exactly. Things like, everyone is judging me, or I'm going to make a fool of myself.
Yeah, those kinds of thoughts.
Then they would work together to challenge those thoughts to examine the evidence for and against them.
So basically putting those negative thoughts on trial.
In a way, yeah. And ultimately, the goal is to replace those negative thoughts with more realistic and positive ones.
So it's about reframing the way they think about social situations.
Exactly. And CBT also involves behavioral techniques.
Such as?
Gradually exposing the person to the situations they fear, but in a safe and controlled way.
That makes sense. By facing their fears head on, they can learn that the outcome isn't as catastrophic as they imagine.
It's about desensitizing them to those triggers and proving to themselves that they can handle it.
So CBT essentially helps people change their relationship with anxiety.
That's a great way to put it. It equips them with the tools and strategies to manage anxiety rather than letting it control their lives.
It's about empowerment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the research supports this approach. CBT consistently shows positive outcomes for a wide range of anxiety disorders.
That's encouraging to hear.
It is.
So we've talked about CBT and how it can help people reframe their thinking and develop coping skills.
Right.
But are there other types of therapy that can be helpful for anxiety disorders?
Oh, definitely. There are other approaches.
Like what?
Well, another common one is exposure therapy, which is particularly effective for treating phobias.
Exposure therapy. I remember the booklet mentioned that.
Yeah.
So I'm picturing like the classic example of someone with a fear of spiders.
Okay.
Would exposure therapy involve like actually putting a spider on their arm?
No, not quite that dramatic.
Okay, good.
But you're on the right track. It's a more gradual process.
So how does it work?
Well, for someone with a spider phobia, they might start by just looking at pictures of spiders.
Okay.
Then maybe watching videos and eventually working their way up to being in the same room as a spider.
So step by step, getting closer and closer to the source of their fear.
Exactly. The idea is to gradually desensitize them to their triggers.
It seems like a common thread in all of these therapies is helping people confront their fears rather than avoiding them.
Absolutely. Avoidance might provide temporary relief, but it ultimately reinforces the anxiety.
Makes sense.
By facing their fears head on in a safe and controlled environment, they can learn that the outcome isn't as scary as they imagined.
So you're saying that facing your fears can actually make them less scary.
That's the idea. It helps them build confidence in their ability to cope.
And speaking of coping, the booklet also mentions the importance of family support.
Oh, absolutely. A strong support system can make a huge difference in a person's recovery journey.
So what role can family and friends play?
Well, they can provide encouragement, understanding, a listening ear.
It's not always easy to live with an anxiety disorder, so having loved ones who are understanding and supportive can make a big difference.
Yeah, it can provide a much-needed sense of security and validation.
And I would imagine it can be really tough for family members and friends, too, if they don't understand what their loved one is going through.
You're right. It's not always easy to know how to support someone with an anxiety disorder.
So what can they do?
Well, having access to information and resources can be really helpful for family members and friends who want to be supportive but aren't sure how.
Like with any other health challenge, the more we know, the better equipped we are to help ourselves and the people we care about.
Well said.
Okay, so we've talked about the different types of anxiety disorders, the symptoms, the treatments.
Right.
But there's something I've been wondering about.
Okay, what's that?
The booklet mentions that anxiety disorders often coexist with other conditions like depression or substance abuse.
Right. They often go hand in hand.
Why is that? Is there a connection?
That's a great question, and it's one that researchers are still trying to fully understand.
Okay.
It's likely that there are multiple factors at play.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. Well, someone with an anxiety disorder might turn to drugs or alcohol as a way to self-medicate and cope with their symptoms.
So they're trying to numb the anxiety, but it ends up creating even more problems in the long run.
Exactly. Substance abuse can actually mask the underlying anxiety disorder, making it even more difficult to diagnose and treat effectively.
It's like a vicious cycle.
You could say that, and when you add depression to the mix, it becomes even more complex.
How so?
Where anxiety and depression often go hand in hand.
Yeah.
They share some similar symptoms, and they can feed off each other.
Oh, I see.
Someone who's constantly worried and anxious might start to feel hopeless and depressed.
And those feelings of depression can then make the anxiety worse.
Exactly. It's a complicated interplay of factors.
So it's important to seek help early on before things spiral out of control.
Absolutely. The earlier someone gets help, the better the outcome is likely to be.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. The booklet briefly touches on the role of research in furthering our understanding of these disorders.
Right. Research is crucial in this field.
It mentions studies on genetics, environmental factors, even brain imaging, to try and pinpoint the causes of anxiety disorders.
It's a fascinating area of study.
It seems like there's still so much we don't know about anxiety disorders.
That's true. But with each new study, we're getting closer to understanding these complex conditions.
What are some of the current areas of research that you find particularly interesting?
Well, the booklet mentions some fascinating research on the role of the amygdala and hippocampus in anxiety.
Those are parts of the brain, right?
Yes, they're key areas of the brain involved in processing emotions and memories.
Okay.
And studies are finding that these areas may function differently in people with anxiety disorders.
So by studying the brain, we can potentially develop more targeted treatments.
Exactly. It's all about getting a clearer picture of the biological basis of anxiety.
That makes sense. What else?
Another exciting area of research is looking at the role of gut bacteria in mental health.
Gut bacteria.
Yeah, did you know that there's a growing body of evidence suggesting a link between the gut microbiome and anxiety?
I had no idea. So the bacteria in our gut could actually be influencing our anxiety levels.
That's what the research is suggesting.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is. It just goes to show how much there is still to learn about the complexities of the human body and mind.
So much to explore.
Absolutely. And it sounds like this research could lead to some really innovative treatments down the road.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
But before we wrap up, I'd love to get your take on what you think is the most important takeaway for our listener today.
Besides the fact that the bacteria in your gut could be giving you anxiety.
Yes. Besides that, what's the big picture message you want to leave our listener with?
I think the most important takeaway is that anxiety disorders are incredibly common.
They are.
And that they're treatable, there's hope for recovery.
That's a really important message. You're not alone if you're struggling with anxiety.
Exactly.
There are people who understand, and there are effective treatments available.
And there are things you can do on your own to manage your anxiety.
Like what?
Things like practicing relaxation techniques, getting regular exercise, and making sure you're getting enough sleep.
Those are great everyday tips, and most importantly, don't suffer in silence.
Right. Reach out for help.
Talk to your doctor, find a therapist, and build a strong support system.
Reaching out for help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
It takes courage to acknowledge that you need support.
And it's the first step toward getting better.
Wow, it's amazing how much we've covered in this deep dive.
I know, right?
We started with a stack of sources on anxiety disorders, and now we have this comprehensive understanding.
It's like we've assembled this big puzzle.
Of different types, symptoms,
Right.
treatments, even the latest research.
Exactly, and it all came together so seamlessly.
It's a testament to the power of focused learning, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. We took a complex topic and made it digestible and even fascinating.
I hope so, and yet there's still so much more to explore.
Always, right?
It feels like we've just scratched the surface.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it?
What do you mean?
The more you learn, the more you realize there is to discover.
It's like opening a door to a whole new world.
Exactly, and that's what we want to do for our listener today.
Open that door to further exploration.
We've talked about all these different ways that anxiety can manifest.
Right?
But what stood out to you most from our deep dive?
That's a great question.
Was there a particular symptom that resonated with you, or maybe a treatment option that sparked your curiosity?
Perhaps you've had personal experience with anxiety, or maybe you know someone who has.
Whatever it is, we encourage you to take what you've learned today and see how it connects to your own life.
Maybe you're even inspired to do a little research of your own.
There are so many great resources available online and in libraries.
And with each new piece of information, you're gaining a deeper understanding, not just of anxiety disorders, but of yourself and the world around you.
Exactly, it's all connected.
We also hope that this deep dive has given you the confidence to have more open and honest conversations about mental health.
It's so important to break down those stigmas.
Because the more we talk about these issues, the less scary and isolating they become.
Absolutely, knowledge is power. And when we share that knowledge, we empower each other.
Beautifully said. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of anxiety disorders.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
Likewise, and to our listener, thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery.
Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and remember, you're not alone.